to the Target UPSC Prelims 2024 series, and the topic or the subject which we will be covering today is the economy subject, and this is the episode 4 of economy. So let's begin. The first topic that we will be talking about is internationalization of Indian rupee. So high chances that this topic can be asked in the mains examination, because this was very much in news and this has been very much in news. So internationalization of Indian rupee. Why was this in news? So RBI, which is the Central Bank of India, so the Reserve Bank of India appointed a working group, recommended inclusion of the rupee in the SDR basket. So SDR is the special drawing rights, and it is given by the IMF. So it is a basket of few currencies, the currencies which are most acceptable around the world and the powerful currencies. So there is a recommendation that the inclusion of rupee should be done in the special drawing rights basket, and recalibration of the foreign portfolio investor regime to accelerate the pace of internationalization of rupee. Because if the rupee will be included in the SDR, so this will give a boost to the concept of internationalization of rupee concept. Then what is internationalization of rupee? So what is it actually all about? So it is a process that involves increasing use of the local currency in cross-border transactions. Like as of now, the most acceptable currency is US dollar. See, what happens is, if imagine this is one country, imagine this is Russia, and this is second country, this is India. So if both are doing trade with each other, even though India and Russia are as of now doing trade in each other's currency, but usually what we see is around the world, the currency in which most of the trade is done is dollar, and dollar is the most accepted and one of the most powerful and one of the most stable currencies in the world. So what is internationalization of rupee is that between two countries, Indian rupee should become that much powerful that between the two countries, when bilateral trade or multilateral trade is going on, then the payment can be done in Indian rupee. As of now, India is doing it with few countries, like for example Russia. India bought Russian oil in rupees. Then with UAE also India is doing, and many other countries also. But usually this does not happen with all other countries, specifically with the American continent countries or the European continent countries. So the cross-border transactions should increase in the local currency, and that is the Indian rupee. It involves promoting the rupee for import and export trade. That is, if we are importing something, we should be able to make the payment in Indian rupee. So it involves promoting the rupee for import and export trade, and then other current account transactions, followed by its use in capital account transactions. So when the import and export trade, the payments can be made, or the payments will be made in the local currency, that is Indian rupee. So slowly and gradually in the capital account and in the current account also, the payments will be made in the local currency. Now about the historical context. So during the time of 1950s, Indian rupee was widely used as a legal tender in other countries like UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman and Qatar. When we say legal tender, it means that the currency is legally accepted and the currency is legally backed by any kind of law. Like for example, the legal checks are legal tenders, coins are legal tenders, rupees are legal tenders. The devaluation of India's currency by 1966 led to the introduction of sovereign currencies in these countries to reduce resilience on the Indian rupee. So when other countries start having their own local currencies, so this reduced the confidence of people and the confidence of other countries on India's rupee. Now, what are the benefits of internationalization of rupee? So, if the rupee will become international, what will be the benefits of it? First, appreciate currency value. If the internationalization or the acceptability of Indian rupee will increase, then the currency, Indian currency will appreciate. It means the value of the Indian currency will increase. So it will improve the demand for the rupee in international trade. It means that more and more countries will be making payment in the Indian rupee. If that will happen, it means that the acceptability of Indian rupee and the stability of Indian economy is also accepted by the world. This can lead to increased convenience and reduced transaction cost for businesses and individuals dealing with India. Increased convenience, because if the other country will also be comfortable with the Indian rupee, so things will be done conveniently. And reduced transaction cost for business, because as of now what happens is, like imagine if any kind of trade is done. So if the trade is done in dollars, then first of all the payments are made in dollars and then the conversion of dollar into rupee. So if the internationalization of rupee will take place, then this process will not be followed. Then directly the payment would be made in Indian rupee, so that the conversion cost and the conversion rate will not come in between. Now, reduced exchange rate volatility. So when a currency is internationalized, its exchange rate tends to stabilize. So the exchange rate means every country or every currency has its own exchange rate. So if the internationalization of rupee will increase, then it tells a lot about how acceptable and how stable the Indian currency or the Indian rupee will be. So the exchange rate will also be stable. The increased demand for the currency in global market can help reduce volatility. So the volatility will be reduced because internationalization means Indian economy is doing well, making it more predictable, because volatility will be less, so predictability will increase. And reliable for international transactions. Reliable because overall the economy is also stable. Overall the economy's pillars are also stable and static. Then geopolitical advantages. If internationalization of rupee takes place, this says that the Indian economy is strong, the Indian GDP growth is strong, and the international agencies are also saying good things about the Indian economy. So this also puts India at a very strong position with regard to the geopolitical situation also. Internationalizing the rupee can enhance India's geopolitical influence. It can strengthen economic ties with other countries, facilitate bilateral trade agreements, and promote diplomatic relations. Like for example, you can say, see, as of now, we all know what is going on with China. So the economy of China is not doing well. Slowdown can be seen there, and the problem of deflation is also coming up. Now what happens is, on the other hand, if India's economy is doing well and India's economy is becoming stable, and there is investment being done in India's economy, like for example the FDI or the FPI, then what will happen? It says a lot about the economy and the economic growth that the country is seeing. So if over a long period of time India's economy does well, it means that the economy is stable. It means that people will gain confidence in the economy. So if the confidence in the economy will be there, then the currency, the Indian local currency, that is the Indian rupee, it will get reflected in the volatile nature of the Indian rupee, because the Indian rupee will then become stable. It will become strong. Its acceptability will be more with regard to other countries. Like for example, US dollar is acceptable, UK pound is acceptable, Europe's euro is acceptable, China's renminbi is acceptable, Japan's yen is acceptable. So the same way India's rupee will also be acceptable. And if that India's rupee will be included in the SDR, that is the special drawing rights by the IMF, so that is a basket of a few strong currencies of the world. So if Indian rupee will be included in it, that will tell a lot about how well Indian economy is doing and how well Indian rupee is also doing in the market. So now if there will be some positives, then there will certainly be some challenges also. That is, first, limited international demand. So the daily average share of for the rupee in the global forex market is only around 1.6%, while India's share of global goods trade is 2%. So as of now, the challenge is that India first of all needs to do well with regard to its import and export, because India's rupee will become internationalized only when its presence in the international market will become or will increase with time. Then convertibility concern. India as of now is not fully convertible. So Indian rupee is not fully convertible. It means that there are certain restrictions with regard to India's rupee convertibility. There are certain restrictions on its convertibility for certain purposes, specifically with regard to the capital transactions. So complete convertibility is not there. Capital transactions, the convertibility is limited. This restricts its widespread use in international trade and finances. To become internationalized, so the convertibility needs to be full, not partial. Demonetization impact. So the demonetization exercise in the year 2016, along with the recent withdrawal of the 2000 rupee note, this has affected confidence in the rupee, particularly in neighboring countries like Bhutan and Nepal. So all these events tells that there is volatility in the economy, because when any kind of major event takes place in the economy and economy gets little volatile, so this says that stability is missing, reliance is not complete. Then challenges in trade settlements. While efforts have been made to trade with around 18 countries in rupees, transactions have remained limited. So India needs to increase its transaction of rupee with other countries apart from the few reliable partners with whom it does its trade, and it needs to increase its reach to other countries also, like for example UK, Europe, North American, South American countries. Next is the Corporate Debt Market Development Fund. So this is CDMDF, Corporate Debt Market Development Fund. So it is a fund with regard to the corporate sector of India, so which will deal with the debt of the corporate. So why was it in news? So the government of India has approved the guarantee scheme for corporate debt. So the guarantee scheme for corporate debt has been approved by the government of India. So whatever debt the corporate is having, there will be a scheme for the handling of that corporate debt. To provide a guarantee cover for the debt raised by the Corporate Debt Market Development Fund that aims to stabilize the corporate bond market during times of stress. So what happens is, see, corporate contributes a lot of amount to our economy and to our GDP, and with it corporate also takes a lot of loan in the market. So the corporate debt needs to be maintained for the stability of the economy. So during the time of stress, when the economy is not doing well and the corporate debt is increasing, there needs to be a guaranteed scheme, there needs to be a cover. So with the aim of stabilization of the economy, the guarantee scheme for corporate debt was introduced. Thus, SEBI has issued guidelines for the operation and management of the scheme and the fund. So it is the SEBI which will be looking into this fund. So what is the guarantee scheme for corporate debt? So what is this guarantee scheme all about? So it provides a complete guarantee cover for debt raised by the development fund. So there will be a complete guarantee cover. So whatever debt the corporate will be taking, there will be a complete guarantee cover with regard to that debt. and the primary objective will be to enhance investors' confidence and provide stability to the corporate debt market. So if there will be a complete guarantee cover, so this will give confidence to the people who are investing in the corporate or investing in any kind of startup, and this will tell them that there is certain kind of legal backing which the corporate debt is getting. So this will increase people's confidence into the market. It will be managed by the guarantee fund for corporate debt, and the GFCD is a trust formed by the Department of Economic Affairs. So it is formed by the Department of Economic Affairs, and it will be managed by the National Credit Guarantee Trustee Company, which is a wholly owned company of the Department of Financial Services under Ministry of Finance. So overall, it will be the Ministry of Finance who will be looking into the matter. Then the guaranteed cover provided will ensure that investors are protected from potential risks. So investors, people who are investing, they will be protected with any kind of potential risk associated with the investment grade corporate debt securities. So overall, it will be very good for the corporate world. Then what is Corporate Debt Market Development Fund? That is CDMDF. So what it is? It is an alternative investment fund established to address the needs of the corporate debt market in India, and it will be launched as a close-ended scheme. So it is an alternative investment fund. So see, the usual investment fund, it is like an alternative investment fund, and this has been designed after looking into the needs of the corporate world. So what basically is their need, and it will serve as a backstop facility for investment grade corporate debt securities, providing stability and enhancing investor confidence in the market. As we discussed this, that basically the main idea is about increasing the stability and the confidence. Then it will provide a backstop facility of rupees 33,000 crore. 33,000 crore. So this will become an important point. Alternate investment fund, rupees 33,000 crore, and the government will contribute rupees 30,000 crore, and the asset management companies will provide the remaining rupees 3,000 crore. So you will need to be very careful. There are two components into it. First is the government who is making the contribution, and then there is asset management companies also. So completely it is not that the government is making the investment. Then the Corporate Debt Market Development Fund, it aims to enhance secondary market liquidity by creating a permanent institutional framework that can be activated during the period of market stress. So with regard to this, for corporate world, the permanent institutional framework will also be created, and this framework will give guidelines that during the time of stress what needs to be done and how the situation needs to be handled. Then comes next topic, and that is the AMC Repo Clearing Limited. Repo Clearing Limited. So recently the Ministry of Finance has inaugurated the limited purpose clearing corporation called AMC Repo Clearing Limited. Important word here is repo. So what is it all about? So it is a limited purpose clearing corporation that provides clearing and settlement services. So what happens is, in any kind of transaction or any kind of process going on, so there are two aspects to it, and there are two companies. One is the lender and other is the receiver. So between the lender and the receiver, if any kind of settlement is done or any kind of business is going on, then that business needs clearing and settlement of funds. So the AMC Repo Clearing Limited is a limited clearing corporation whose basic work is about clearing and settlement of services to all trades made in corporate debt securities on the NSE and BSE. NSE is National Stock Exchange and BSE is the Bombay Stock Exchange. So on the Bombay Stock Exchange or the National Stock Exchange, any kind of transaction being made with regard to the corporate debt securities, the clearing and settlement services will be provided by the AMC Repo Clearing Limited. And it received in principle approval from the SEBI. So SEBI has given its approval, and the Stock Exchanges and Clearing Cooperation Regulation 2018. So SECC and SEBI both has given its approval, and it has been granted certificate of authorization by the Reserve Bank of India. So Reserve Bank of India has also given its authorization under the Payment and Settlement Systems Act 2007 to offer central counterparty clearing house services for the repo transactions in corporate debt securities. So central counterparty clearing means that a company who does the work of clearing and settling all the claims. Now what will be its functions? So the ARCL offers tri-party repo services and central counterparty services. Tri-party repo services means that in total there are 3 parties. So between the lender and the receiver, the AMC Limited will offer all the services. And then there is central counterparty. It means that the AMC Limited will do all the work of the clearing and settlement of trade between the 2 parties. To facilitate repo transactions in corporate bonds, which are short-term borrowing backed by securities as collateral. So we all know that repo rate, that is the repurchase rate. So repo rate is for short-term. So this is also for short-term borrowings, and that will keep securities as collateral. So this is actually very close with the concept of the repo rate. Then it will also help to widen and deepen the corporate bond repo market, which is currently underdeveloped and illiquid compared to the government bond repo market. So that is basically underdeveloped and illiquid as compared to the government bond repo market. So the corporate bond repo market needs to develop further. Then it allows holders of bonds to meet short-term liquidity needs without liquidating their assets, providing flexibility to market participants. So this is to meet the short-term liquidity needs, because repo rate is basically for the short term, bank rate is for the longer run. Then this will also reduce the counterparty risk, operational risk and settlement risk for the participants, because this has got its authorization from the SEBI and also from the RBI. So this will have a legal backing. So it will reduce the risk of any kind of mishappening. Then some additional pointers. So that is, first of all, what is secondary market? So secondary market is also known as the aftermarket, refers to the financial market where previously issued financial instruments such as stocks, bonds, derivatives and other securities are bought and sold among investors. So the place or the platform on which the selling and receiving of the things are going on, or the trade is going on, so that platform is known as the secondary market. Then comes the corporate bond, and we all know that when the word bond comes, so bond is a debt security. So corporate bond are debt securities which is issued by corporations to raise capital for any kind of purposes, like for example expanding its operation, funding projects or refining existing debt. So corporate bond is, these are issued by the corporations to raise capital from the people. Then tri-party repo services. So these are financial transactions where a third party, often a custodian or clearing agent, acts as an intermediary between the 2 parties involved in a repurchase agreement. So if there are 2 parties in a repurchase agreement who are doing the business or trade, then there is third party which will be the tri-party repo services, and this third party will be looking into the aspects of clearing of all the settlements. So next point is the concerns of over deflation in China. As we all know that the economy of China as of now is going through the period of slowdown. So there are concerns of over deflation. We will be coming to the point that what is deflation, but I hope that you people must have heard the points or the terms like inflation, deflation, disinflation, stagflation. So these type of terms can be asked in the examination, because we see that inflation specifically is one of the most favorite topics of UPSC. So be very clear with regard to inflation and all the aspects related to inflation. So let's get back to this. So China's National Bureau of Statistics reported that the consumer price index, that is the CPI, had declined in July 2023 by 0.3% compared to the year earlier, causing deflation in the country. So deflation is going on in China. Now what is deflation? So deflation is the opposite of inflation. So if this is inflation, it is opposite of inflation. It means this will be this. It refers to a sustained and general decrease in the overall price levels of goods and services in the country. Now see, what happens is inflation means increase of prices of goods in market. And in India, if we talk about, then inflation range is 4 plus minus 2%. It means from 2% to 6%. So this is inflation. Now there are two other aspects, that is deflation and then there is disinflation. Okay, now we need to see this. Now imagine just a hypothetical situation. Now imagine that there is a country in which the inflation rate has reached 8%. 8% means a very high level of inflation. Imagine we are in India, so inflation rate if reaches 8%, so this is going much outer or much away from the bracket that we have. So as of now in India, the bracket that we have is 4 plus minus 2%. So in India, imagine a situation where the inflation has reached 8%. Now if imagine that in January the inflation is 8%, in the month of February inflation starts to come down, becomes 7%, March it becomes 6%, April it becomes 5%. Now what is happening is that the rate of inflation is coming down, and it is coming down. So the rate of inflation is coming down, and the rate of inflation which is coming down is not causing any harm to the economy, because the rate at which it is coming down, it is reaching in the bracket where it should be. So this aspect where the rate of inflation is coming down is called disinflation. This is disinflation, rate of inflation. Then comes the point of deflation. Now imagine where this point of inflation becomes negative, or this reaches below 0. Then that scenario is called deflation. And if that becomes 0, it means there is a slowdown in the economy. It means that there is lack of demand in the economy. It means there is lack of consumption in the economy, because that the inflation rate will come down to 0 or in negative is a situation only when people are not going in the market, people are not going out, and people are not buying anything. That situation is called deflation. So deflation actually shows that there is something wrong in the economy of any country. Now let's get back. So in a deflationary environment, consumers can buy more goods and services for the same amount of money over time. So yes, now imagine that earlier if the price of 1 kg of onion is 60 rupees, and now because of deflation, the 1 kg of an onion can be bought in 20 rupees. So it means that earlier the thing which was for 60 rupees, now it is for 20 rupees. It means that in the same amount we can buy much more stuff. Deflation can occur for various reasons such as reduced consumer demand. Yes. Oversupply of goods. It means that the supply is so much and demand is not there. It means no one is buying the things. Then technological advancements that lower production costs. True. Tight monetary policies by central bank. So if there will be a tight monetary policy by the central bank, it means people will not have much money in their hands to spend. In China's case, reduced consumer demand and economic slowdown are the reasons. And China's real estate sector and the automobile sector is also going through slowdown. Then impact of it, positive impacts would be lower interest rates. So the central bank may lower interest rate to encourage borrowing and spending. So if the interest rates will be less, it means that the people can take loan easily. So if people will take loan easily from the central bank, then they will have more money in their hands to spend, and they will have to return that money for a very minimal interest rate. So people can take loan and then people can spend it in the economy. So this will raise money in the economy. So the economy will start to move around. Then improved saving incentives. So deflation can encourage saving because the value of money increases over time. Because the value of money increases over time, savers are more likely to see the value of their money grow, which can incentivize them to save more for the future, contributing to long-term financial stability. Now what happens is, because earlier, as compared to earlier times, the same things can be bought at a very lesser price. So if there is a person who's a salaried employee, so that person on regular and every month on regular grounds will be receiving a certain amount of payment. So if these kind of people who will be receiving a sustained amount or sustained income, so those people can look from the perspective of saving more amount of money. Then favorable for fixed income beneficiaries, as I just told you. So the value of money increases, their fixed income becomes relatively more valuable, providing them with a stable and reliable source of income. Because what earlier they were spending more for, now they will get the same thing at a lesser price. Now the negative impact. So downward spiral of economic contraction, that is true. So when consumers expect prices to fall further, they delay purchases, and when they delay purchases, so what happens is that there is supply in the market but the demand is not there. So now this situation will lead to a slowdown in the economy. This situation will halt the economy. This cycle can create a downward spiral of economic contraction. If economy will contract because there is no consumption, then job losses will take place and financial instability will increase. Then drive down business revenue. Lower prices drive down business revenues, leading to lower profits, less investments, and potentially higher unemployment as companies back on production in the face of decreased demand. That is true, because if the demand in the market will decrease, it means that ultimately the production will be less. If the production will be less, it means that the consumption in the market is less. If the consumption in the market is less, it means that the production which will take place next time will also be less. It means that less number of people will be required to make the same things. So this overall will lead to problems and unemployment situation will increase. Now what caused deflation in China? That is zero COVID policy, slowdown in property and banking sector, and unemployment. So this property or the real estate sector, which was a booming industry in China, has come to a halt. And the banking sector and the automobile sector is also going through a period of slowdown. Now impact on India and the world over. See, China, if we talk about, then US is the biggest economy in the world with regard to GDP, and second is the China. So it means that China is a powerhouse, and with regard to the manufacturing, China is also a powerhouse. So if the second largest economy of the world is going through a slowdown, it is bound to hamper relations, and it is bound to affect economy or the economic situation of the countries world over, because the countries with whom China is doing bilateral trade or multilateral trade, those country will also go through a turbulence, because if there is instability in China's market, if the China's economy is not doing well, then imagine about the stock market situation of the world, because the manufacturing hub of the world is not doing well. And if we talk about the electronics market, then China is the biggest exporter of the electronics market in the world. So that is how it will affect the supply chains and the industry and the economy of the world over. Then comes the next topic, and that is the Reserve Bank of India study on investment trends in India for the fiscal year 2022-23. So why was this in news? So the Reserve Bank of India's recent study sheds light on the state-wise distribution of capital investments in India during the fiscal year 2022-23. So the distribution of capital investment means investment for a longer period of time or investment with regard to creation of any kind of asset. So the study examines the geographical and sectoral trends that shape the landscape of project funding across the country. So let's see this about the capital investments. So what are the highlights of the study? First, investment surge and capital outlay. So there is a surge with regard to investment. So the credit offtake soared by 19.7%. So the credit offtake has increased by 19.7% in July 2023. Then the aggregate capital outlay reached an impressive of over rupees 3.5 lakh crore. So in total, it is saying that there is money in the market. Then state-wise share in total project cost. So what is the state-wise share? So with regard to the top performers, so Uttar Pradesh has emerged as the top performer, accounting for the highest share, that is 16.2% in the total cost of projects. Then Uttar Pradesh is followed by Gujarat, Odisha, Maharashtra and Karnataka. With regard to the non-performing states, that is the bottom performers, so that is Kerala, Goa and Assam. Sectors driving investments. So which is the sector in the economy which is driving this investment scenario? So that is the infrastructure sector. So the infrastructure sector has played a pivotal role, and it accounted for 60% of the total project cost. So out of overall amount, 60% is what the infrastructure sector is doing. Then road and bridge projects within the infrastructure sector garnered significant attention, benefiting from the Bharatmala initiative. Now, what are the factors influencing the investment momentum in India? So that is government capital expenditure, rising business optimism. So business optimism is also rising in the country with regard to the MSME and the entrepreneurship, and capital expenditure is always a positive for the economy. And a revival of private sector expenditure in selected sectors, that is with regard to even now after the COVID pandemic, the economy has opened and is expanding. Despite the upward revision of the repo rate, credit offtake experienced robust growth. So overall, even the private sector is involving itself in the economic growth. Next is the Advisory Board on Banking and Financial Frauds. So to keep an eye on this, our advisory board. So the CVC, that is the Central Vigilance Commission, it has reconstituted the Advisory Board on Banking and Financial Frauds to fortify the examination of bank fraud cases. So CVC has reconstituted. So it is the CVC who is responsible for it to look into the bank fraud cases. Then about the ABFF, that is the bank fraud cases, it serves as the first level examination body for bank fraud cases before they are referred to the investigative agency like CBI. So before, first the ABBFF will look into the matter and then it will be referred to the CBI. Then it is empowered to conduct periodic fraud analysis within the financial system. So within the system, periodic fraud analysis, like for example in every 3 months or every 6 months. Then it offers insights and policy recommendations related to fraud prevention and management. So with regard to how to stop the fraud, it can suggest ways. Now the composition and the tenure. So it will include the chairman and 4 other members. So it will include the chairman and the 4 other members, and each will be contributing their expertise to the fraud related members. And the chairman and members will hold their position for the tenure of 2 years. So the tenure will be for 2 years. Then mandatory referrals and advisory role. So the role is advisory in nature, it is not binding. So all public sector banks, insurance companies and financial institutions are required to refer fraud cases exceeding rupees 3 crore to ABBFF before initiating criminal investigations. So this is an important point, that you should know that the fraud cases should be of more than 3 CR. The advice provided regarding criminality and malafide involvement of officials must be considered by the competent authority. So whatever the advice will be given, it should be considered. And the purview extends to providing advisory support for cases referred by the CVC or the CBI. So if any case will be referred by the CVC or the CBI, so it has the purview to extend the advisory support. And the sunset clause has also been omitted in this. So the sunset clause will be omitted. Next is the coking coal. Next topic is coking coal. So collaborative endeavors between the Ministry of Steel and the Ministry of Coal have yielded remarkable outcomes, enhancing the availability of domestic coking coal and significantly reducing the need for import. So availability of domestic coking coal will increase. So the domestic raw coking coal production is projected to reach 140 million ton by the year 2030. 140 million ton. Now initiatives to boost domestic coking coal. First is the Mission Cooking Coal. So the Ministry of Coal has embarked on the Mission Cooking Coal during the financial year 22, aligning with the National Steel Policy 2017. And the aim of this mission will be to significantly curb coking coal import by embracing a multifaceted approach. So the import or production, domestic production should increase while the import should decrease. This is the main goal. And the goal is to reduce dependence through exploration, enhanced production, technological advancements, private sector engagement and establishment of new washeries, quality enhancement. So overall the major aim is that the import should decrease. Next is the auction of coking coal blocks. So that is a significant milestone was accomplished as the Ministry of Coal allocated 16 coking coal blocks. 4 were auctioned in the year 2022-23. Now few of the abandoned mines needs to be revived to increase the domestic production. So the mines which has been abandoned till now, revival will be, or their reviving of those mines needs to be done. So the Bharat Coking Coal Limited, which is a subsidiary of the Indian Coal Limited, has opened new avenues by inviting agencies and companies to undertake coking coal extraction. Coking coal extraction from the mines which has been abandoned till now, as working into the abandoned mines will increase the production. Then collaborative pact with Steel Authority of India Limited, that is the SAIL. So SAIL and BCCL signed an MOU to supply 1.8 million ton of washed cooking coal. So there will be a pact between the BCCL and SAIL. Now auction for raw cooking coal. So the Tata Steel has secured 50,000 tons of raw cooking coal from CCL mines, underscoring the commitment to domestic sourcing. CCL is the Central Coalfield Limited and it is a subsidiary of the Coal India Limited. So the raw cooking coal auction needs to be done. Then encouraging innovative greenfield washeries, and that is the Ministry of Coal actively promotes the establishment of greenfield washeries or refurbishment of existing BCCL washeries. See, greenfield means that something which needs to be built from the scratch. Then about the cooking coal. So cooking coal is also known as the metallurgical coal, and it is a type of coal that is used to make coke, and coke is a key material for the production of steel. So basically the production of steel that we see, so cooking coal plays a very important role in the production of steel, and coke is used as a fuel and as a reducing agent in smelting iron ore in a blast furnace. With regard to smelting of iron ore, blast furnace process is important. And cooking coal is different from other forms of coal because it has a unique caking ability that makes it suitable for heating at high temperature in the absence of air. So cooking coal can be heated at a very high temperature in the absence of air. And cooking coal is classified into 4 types based on its quality and performance. That is hard cooking coal, semi-hard cooking coal, semi-soft cooking coal, and pulverized coal for injection. So this was about the topic of the cooking coal. So what we covered in today's episode was cooking coal. Then we talked about Advisory Board on Banking and Financial Frauds. Then we talked about RBI study on investment trends in India for financial year 2022-23. Then we talked about concerns of over deflation in China. Then AMC Repo Clearing Limited. Then Corporate Debt Market Development Fund. Then internationalization of Indian rupee. So these are the topics that we discussed in today's video, and this is all that we have discussed in today's video. So more topics we will be discussing in the coming video. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Till we meet next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep subscribing to the channel. Thank you.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.